I remember Bruce Taylor being a big fan. We're starting?
Yeah, we started.
So I remember Bruce Taylor being a big fan of the idea of having children being looked after in a DGH on an adult unit, and he had many cases to show that worked.
So I think, Bruce, obviously, I'd known for a very long time, and when I started my consultant's job, I was in Southampton. I helped set up the retrieval service. So one of my first jobs was to go and talk to Bruce and Pete McQuillan about children, and obviously on the South Coast, they had created paediatric intensive care. And so I do get a lot of the not animosity, but the concerns that what we're doing is trying to go back to where we were, in terms of that we're trying to push back time, and that we, as paediatric intensivists, we'd said to people, you weren't good enough. I don't believe that. It wasn't something that I created, and maybe I would have done it differently, but I'm really clear that for most paediatric intensivists, we've never believed that we are better than adult intensive care. I think one of the things we embraced from a very early on is the network approach. So we cannot survive without working with our region, because 5 to 10% of children with critical care needs are in district general hospitals. So we're never going to get away from that. So no matter whatever system we create, we're always going to have sick children, not only just crashing and burning and need to be resuscitated within district general hospitals, but actually staying within district general hospitals. And so the idea of just saying this is not our responsibility, this is not our job, it's not for us to resolve, I think is wishful thinking, because it's always going to be there until we shut 100 district general hospitals. And that's never going to happen politically. Right,
on that note, we should probably do a quick introduction to everybody on the live stream, because we kind of jumped in mid-conversation. So, hi, I'm Shagan. You guys have probably seen me before. I'm a member of the social media team, coming to you live from the Intensive Care Society State of the Art Conference down by Westminster in London. It's been a great conference so far, and what have I got with me today?
Tanj, you've probably heard enough of me all week, but you'll continue hearing more. And sitting between us, we've got...
I've got Peter Wilson. I'm a paediatric intensivist from Southampton, and I'm the clinical lead for the National Paediatric Critical Care Review that is taxing so many of you at the moment. So thank you for listening.
So, Peter, you've just this morning been in a fierce debate, would you call it, with Anna Batchelor about increasing provision of paediatric intensive care in DGHs. Now, one of the questions that kept coming up again and again and again was, rather than increase provision, why not shut smaller paediatric intensive care units down, have a stronger centralized system, and improve actually your retrieval system?
So I think we absolutely agree that we need to improve our retrieval system. One of the big failings of the retrieval, and it's not failings of the retrieval services, but of the system, is that for many of them, they're not funded to undertake level 2 critical care transfer. And so we have this across the country, this variation in inequity of access for level 2 patients. So, and we all agree that level 2 patients, a non-intubated sick child, is probably the most difficult kid to look after. There's no question in our mind. Should we just shut units? Well, it was one of the things we looked at, and there was a huge proportion of the larger PICUs in the country that believed that if we centralized resources, truly centralized resources, that would be the right thing. I think you've got to remember that there are quite a lot of hospitals that are dependent on having level 2 or level 3 critical care. So there would probably be 3 or 4 hospitals and children's hospitals in London that would shut automatically if we removed their services.
Is that a bad thing?
It may not be, but I suppose I'm a pragmatist, and my whole life, so I've spent 15 years as a consultant, and my whole life so far has been run by the Congenital Cardiac Review that looked to shut 2 of the 12 or the 10 cardiac intensive care units, and after 15 years we've not managed to do anything because politically everybody fights as to who's good enough or who's better than the other person. So my pragmatic view is that we need to do something now. This does not preclude the need for more PICU beds, doesn't preclude shutting units, but what it says at the moment is that where we are at the moment is good, but it's not quite good enough. And part of that is how do we, as Children's Hospital, work with our district general hospitals to improve the care, and that care can only be improved if we have nursing staff, both on adult intensive care, but this is much more around pediatrics, with nursing competencies to look after children with level 2, to have doctors who are competent to look after level 2. So that would be pediatricians with, with a special interest in PICU, but also to look at how do we support adult intensive care and pediatric anesthesia to improve it. Because in my mind, honestly, where we have got to get to, we've got to get to a position whereby we don't have to send every single child who needs anything done to them to a children's hospital.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
So I was speaking to some colleagues here. Yeah. The issue that they have had is that they go back to a place where adult critical care units can have a bed available for a pediatric case. Firstly, that's an empty bed that could have been used by an adult. Secondly, that's the bed manned by people who see these cases so infrequently. Are they the right people to look after the kids?
So I absolutely agree with you, right? So we are not saying that what we want is a space on an adult intensive care unit where we can put children that are going to sit there for a long period of time or that PICU doesn't want.
Yeah.
What we are saying is that we need to create spaces within the pediatric footprint for level 2, and I think there's a slight misconception about what we mean by level 2. Because an adult, I know speaking to my adult colleagues, that level 2 can actually be quite sick. It can involve vasopressors. By level 2, what we're talking about is primarily long-term ventilated children that are stable, that are waiting to get packages to go home, or children with bronchiolitis on Optiflow who haven't been intubated yet. I'm not suggesting in any way. I think there are bits of the country that may want to put children onto the adult intensive care. So we heard today from one of the adult intensivists from the southwest, where they already put quite a lot of children on adult intensive care because of the huge distances to travel. We are not suggesting that that becomes standard practice in adult intensive care. We are suggesting that we train the staff that can look after level 2, so simple stuff initially, that we can then, if necessary, if we have to intubate, that they would still go to a pediatric intensive care unit.
I'm going to address one of the big elephants in the room. So we're talking about trying to get adult nurses, or instead of intensive care nurses, potentially cross-accredited. So to be able to do basic fields of level 2 HDU in a level 2 child, level 3 child, and do adults. After Bawagaba and Isabel Amaro, where is the appetite for that going to come? Because Isabel Amaro was essentially struck off for being an adult nurse managing a level 2, potentially level 3 pediatric child. How do we reconcile that now?
So I think you're absolutely right. We've been done no favors, honestly. I think where we are getting to, and with the support of the Pediatric Intensive Care Society, we've already created quite strict nurse competency guidelines to be able to be signed off for either level 1, level 2 or level 3 that is transferable across the country, so you get nursing passports. And I know that doesn't necessarily prevent these from happening, but I do hope that the lessons from Bawagaba have been learnt. I think that my personal belief is that we may be better protected into the future, because I think we have shown as a profession that we are quite united on this, about that we are trying to do the best thing for the patient, and if we can prove we're doing the best thing for the patient, then I think we will be supported. Now, I may be being naive, I accept, but I also believe at the moment the situation is that we've got children who are sitting on children's wards who are being looked after by all these people who've got no training, no competence, and actually I think that's a much more dangerous situation than saying we're trying to create a framework, a process for people. And I think this is iterative. I think the biggest thing for me is that when we were told to start this, we were told that we had 6 months to undertake the review and come up with solutions. And I think the thing that we've fought long and hard about is to say I could do that, but I would come up with a tick box exercise that was just going to be a review, basically, which is to say what's actually happening in the country. I think if we want to do something different, this is a 3 to 5 year process at least, because it needs bringing people together. It needs people sitting in a room, getting to trust each other, knowing how we work. Because I think there's some really fundamental things we can do together. So transition is the big issue coming down the line for all of us. So can we be in a position where we are much more flexible? So, we've got this artificial divide where you can have a 25-year-old weighing 20 kilograms sitting on an adult intensive care unit with you guys a bit freaked out, and I will have a 12-year-old weighing 100 kilos with acute pancreatitis sitting on my unit. Well, surely we need to be working together. And I think we then come to a place where we are making better decisions, we support each other, and I don't think that is fantasy. I think actually, and I think that the networks that have been created so far, and I think the trauma network, the adult trauma network, is a classic example of how this has actually worked. So this is not a pipe dream. And one of the things I've been very fortunate is that I've been able to go around the country. So everything we're suggesting is being undertaken somewhere in this country, and all we're doing is we're saying, why don't we just do everything anyway?
Okay, so then my second question will then be, so I'm a genie, and I can make your wish come true. What does the ideal situation look like in somewhere like the UK, with the geography we've got, the skill set we've got, and the hospitals we've got? What do you think the ideal would look like? The absolute ideal. No, so infinite money, infinite everything.
So infinite money. Well, so I think that you've got different options, and I think it depends on one of the, so I'm going to answer this with I will give you a final answer as in an absolute. But I suppose what we've had to try to balance is parental family wishes against and societal wishes against the wishes of pediatricians against the wishes of adult intensivists and anaesthetists. And that's quite a big juggling act. So I think if we were to start again, and this is, in my mind, and this is my personal view, not an NHS England view, for all services, we would not have 175 hospitals in such a small island. We would probably have 20 or 30 hospitals.
Really?
Yeah, why wouldn't we?
I completely agree with you.
So if you think about it, right? So if you think about it, everywhere else in the world, if you look at America, you look at Australia, Sweden's done the same thing. One children's hospital each end of the country, no children's services in between, great transport service. If you want, we have enough. We talk about a lot about the fact that we don't have enough staff. We have more than enough staff for our population. They're just in too many hospitals, and so our rotas are too stretched.
I think selling that to medical staff is going to be hard.
I agree.
I think selling it to the public is going to be impossible.
No, but I know. So
I'm not so sure I agree with that, because one of the big problems that we have is that all of the evidence smacks us in the face to tell us the exact opposite. The evidence all points to the fact that volume, the more volume you do, the better you do. It's very, very difficult.
That's not quite true, but I think it's pointing us in that direction. Yes. I don't think it's absolute. I think what you get, and I think what a lot of certainly in children, what is shown in the States is that you have an optimum curve. That if you get too big, you then and so Birmingham Children's PICU is a really good example. They got to such a size that they've now actually got 3 pods on their PICU, all working completely independently of each other. So they've created 3 small PICUs. Or 3 large PICUs. So I don't disagree with you, but I do think from a workforce point of view, it makes absolute sense. Sorry, I'm just talking about if you were a genie and you gave me my wish. I'm a pragmatist. My pragmatic stance said there's no chance we were going to get that past either doctors, because actually we would just end up fighting as to who was the best, or the public, because actually every time we try and shut a very, very small hospital in the middle of nowhere, there are people marching on the streets. So that's not going to... So I think that the thing that makes the biggest difference, honestly, is coherent single governance with people pulling in the same direction. And I know that sounds standardization of care, decreased variation. And as I said, I will repeat this, that all we are suggesting in this review is where we've gone around the country and we've seen where things are being done really, really well. And we're just suggesting, if we did this across the whole country and we decreased variation, we may not create the perfect system, but we would create a slightly better system. We would also create a process that would allow us to make the next step and the next step and the next step. Because at the moment, we're just basically sitting going, we have no idea what to do next, kind of thing.
One of the other questions that was asked during your talk was about workforce planning.
Yeah.
And to sum up the question, intensive care training is really adult intensive care training.
Yep.
Most anaesthetists, and many anaesthetists do go into intensive care in some way or another. They go into adult intensive care training in one shape or another. why is it so few people from the anaesthetic and the intensive care community go into paediatric intensive care? Why are we relying on the paediatricians for this?
So I think there are two things. I think the first is that we, and it's the royal we, as in I'm not blaming any particular royal college in this, has made it very, very difficult for anaesthetists or adult intensivists to get into peds critical care, to peds intensive care. And up until very, very recently, it was almost impossible.
Okay.
Actually, the history of peds critical care from when it was set up, they were all anaesthetists. They were all adult anaesthetists who did peds critical care. So it is only in the last, so I was part of the first cohort, in a way, of paediatricians, where now we have, we are a very fortunate unit. About 2/3 of our intensivists are paediatricians, but that means a third are anaesthetists, which give us a hugely valuable. So we are all very concerned about the move towards it being. We absolutely support it becoming joint. I think the bottom line around why people wouldn't, when I talk to them, is that when I was doing full-time critical care, I'm not anymore. I was working on 1 in 4.
Yeah.
Where I was up all night.
Yeah.
That's not hugely enjoyable. So until we get investment centrally, in the way you guys did, and in some ways, I suppose, for us to be able to do that, we would have to break the system, which there are not many people in the country that are willing to do that. I'm not suggesting adult.
To be fair, adult ICU is kind of in the same position now because it's gone single specialty.
Yeah.
And everything's separating, so a lot of adult ICU rotas are looking quite
I agree.
Devastating, quite lifestyle devastating, and so we all of us are actually all at a reckoning point of thinking, what is? I mean, I know a colleague of mine has just left a job where he was doing a 1 and 2.
Yes.
Yeah. So I absolutely, and so I'm very clear that this is. So I'm a divisional director for Women's and Children's Southampton, and obstetricians, anaesthetists, and paediatricians are the 3 most hard pressed. We've all got vacancies at junior doctor and some consultant level of about 20% at the moment, between 20 and 25%.
Wow.
And so,
Matt Hancock, if you're watching this, please listen.
And that's really concerning. So I suppose what can we do? We are part of the review processes. We have all the royal colleges, all the societies involved in how do we change the way we train. We've got nursing staff involved because actually there's a whole bunch of stuff we need to do around nursing and nursing recruitment to change that. So this isn't, for me, this is not a review where we're saying, I tell you what, got a great idea. Why don't we just chuck all the children into DGHs and forget about it? This is very much saying we need an entire systems approach to this because one side or the other can't hold the solutions in this. We've got to hold it together.
I think you've absolutely nailed that. There is a big burden of care. I think everybody's looked really, really hard at kind of the elective type services, and acute care has kind of been the forgotten brother. And now acute care is just this massive, massive, massive burden being carried by too few people.
I agree, and I'm hoping that I think what's happened, if you look at the history of this, is that when peds split from adults 21 years ago, it was a reasonably acrimonious divorce, and it wasn't very well handled. And I can understand why we ended up with that, but it wasn't very well handled. I think we've now realised that I think both sides have realised actually that we can't do this alone. We've got to do this together, and this is not an either-or option of either DGHs or children's hospitals, either adult intensive care or PICU. This is very much a solution of saying this is a both and, of saying the 2 of us together. Because all our problems coming down the line, I think, are conjoined. So our problem of end-of-life decision-making with families and children is your guys' problem of end-of-life decision-making and children in a few years' time.
Anyway, I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, really glad for that. Really insightful, and hopefully this will inspire people.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers, man. Thank you.
Still streaming.